On this episode, we visit Atlanta, Georgia. The American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials has a new council on active transportation. We drop by the Georgia Tech Sidewalk Research Lab. Finally, we meet the head of the Buckhead Community Improvement District. Stay tuned.
We're at the AASHTO annual meeting in Atlanta, Georgia, talking with Secretary Leslie Richards with Pennsylvania DOT. What does AASHTO stand for?
American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials.
And what is that?
It is the people who lead the state transportation issues across the country, 50 states plus DC and Puerto Rico.
And you chair a council. What's your council?
I chair the Council on Active Transportation.
What do councils do in AASHTO?
Sure. The councils were part of the restructuring that AASHTO recently went through to really represent all of transportation, mobility options, all modes as well. It's not just about roads and bridges. A lot of people associate Department of Transportation with those projects, but it's also about air travel, water travel, freight, passenger rail, and also bicycling and pedestrian movements as well. So however people choose to get around, having those options and access to transit is also included.
Your session this morning was packed. What were people talking about?
We're very excited on the Council on Active Transportation. It's the first time that AASHTO has had a coordinated group to deal with active transportation. When I'm asked what does that mean, I always say, the type of transportation that makes you sweat, right? It's you move. So it's walking, it's biking, it includes e-biking, it's scooters, it's getting along on around on longboards, which is popular in some of our states. And so it's the first time we've all been together. We've been coordinating with the Council on Streets and Highways as well. Their design principles. We want to make sure that equity in transportation, that people in rural areas can get around just as well as people who live in more populated areas. And so giving people those options, again, whether it's to safely walk somewhere, bike somewhere, get to transit, get to some type of obviously buses and vehicles as well. And so we're just making sure that everybody and goods and services as well can get around in the most efficient way possible.
And how do the ideas that you develop make their way out to the membership over time?
Sure. So we have members from each state, plus DC and Puerto Rico, on our council. We have a variety and very diverse group of voting members that includes bike ped coordinators, but also engineers and designers. We have planners. We have people who deal with data in their agencies, as well as people who deal with communication and education. It's a very wide perspective, which is very good when we start talking about these things. We are, for the first time, looking at research projects associated with active transportation and data and IT, as well as how we fit into the connected and automated vehicle space, are all being discussed. So while it is a new group, we are building from the ground up. We're all very excited. For the first time, we will also have balloting privileges on the Green Book, so we'll be working very closely with our design community with streets and highways, in addition to bicycle and pedestrian publications that AASHTO puts out.
What is the Green Book and how does it make a difference in people's lives?
Good question. So the Green Book, some people refer to it as the Bible for highway designers and people who build our assets and infrastructure. And so they look to see what guidance the Green Book gives them as far as what they can or cannot build, how they can fall under federal guidelines as well. So almost every engineer who works in this space in the state has a form of the Green Book at their desk. And so it'll be wonderful that people will be taking a look at this book and making sure that the perspectives of active transportation needs are met through every single chapter for the very first time.
We're in Atlanta at Georgia Tech talking with David Boyer. What do you do here at the university?
Well, John, we do the Sidewalks research for Georgia Tech, part of the Georgia Tech Sidewalk Research Lab. Basically, we do data collection and condition analysis for pedestrian infrastructure and what we call our Sidewalk Asset Management System.
And I guess, is the data collection the first step on that?
That'd be correct. Well, I guess, to be honest, you'd have to plan your data collection before that. But we send undergraduate students out to collect data of the pedestrian infrastructure in regards to ADA, or Americans with Disability Act compliance. So different slopes, different sidewalk widths, particular attention is given to pedestrian ramps and driveway curb cuts.
What sort of tools do the students use?
We have two different platforms. One of them is standing right in front of us. It's a wheelchair-based rolling video collection. We use a tablet that, in addition to collecting video, also tests roughness through several accelerometers. It's all tied to GPS location. And so in that step, we get basically a video log of all of the sidewalks in an area, and then are able to review it and pinpoint locations where there are problems, such as misalignment or a pothole, and perhaps a ramp or a driveway, a curb cut, which we take and catalog and transition into our second data collection system, which is what we call Sidewalk Scout, and it's a cell phone based application where students are using tape measures and levels to take measurements of those slopes and widths to check for particular and refined ADA compliance.
And how would a town or city use this information after it's collected?
So as part of our process and kind of more of our when it gets into our intellectual property, is that we take all this data and run analysis on it and package it into 50-foot sidewalk links. And we take those links and sum up all the different issues with them, weight them, and help a city prioritize where they should go to select for projects. So whether it makes sense to do several blocks at a time or address specific features as they arise. And we think that it allows cities to take actionable steps towards fixing their pedestrian infrastructure.
And when you've gone out and use the equipment, what sort of conditions do you typically find? Are sidewalks good? Are they terrible? Or are they somewhere in between? What have you seen?
So I think it depends a lot on the age of the sidewalk. Anything that was built in probably the last 10 years is usually okay. There might be some minor compliance issues just because of the way sidewalks are constructed, typically by hand, without the use of strict drawings. It's usually a guy with a trowel, and he set up some boards and make sure that he's got a general idea what it looks like. But anything that was built 10 years to 20 years to 30 years, sometimes 50 years, is in varying states of disrepair. We see a lot when cities have trees. Atlanta's a wonderful tree city. That's a huge challenge for sidewalks. Many roots cause uplifts, they cause cracking, and it accelerates the deterioration of the pavement surfaces. Also, areas that are hilly are usually quite challenging. Typically, in a hilly residential area, the driveway coming off the street doesn't match the grade. And so you get these areas where the driveway goes up significantly coming off of the street, and now you've got a cross slope that's greater than 2%, which is required for ADA compliance. And so with that 2% cross slope or greater, we've seen up to 10-15% in significant hilly neighborhoods. And that's something that if someone's on a wheelchair, it tends to push them right out into the road. which is quite a big safety risk.
How difficult is it to transfer the analyzed data once you're finished with it to a government, GIS system of their street network?
Well, with the power of graduate students, anything is possible. But it can be difficult. There's a lot of GIS. We use ArcGIS. Heavy lifting that has to occur. We try and shape it in a way that lends itself to being pleasing visually and being able to interpret just by looking at it. And with that, there's a lot of aggregation of data and kind of weighting that goes into which sidewalks are relatively worse or better than others. And in that way, we can show two different ways. We can show visually, this is where your issues are, and you can kind of intuitively look and go, okay, that's the area we need to look at. And then also granularly, we have it, each link is given a number relative towards the others. And so you can look at it from a project by project standpoint, and then kind of naturally accumulate them when it makes sense to do so.
What are the next steps on this? What's left to do to perfect the system?
Well, we'd like to make a lot of it more automated. There's several processes that could be linked together. We've actually started working with a couple programmers to kind of speed the process from raw data to processed data. And then what my research is actually focused on is taking the project prioritization and turning that into a cost estimate. And so how using local currencies, local kind of it's going to cost different in Atlanta than it will in San Diego, that sort of thing. And then best practices, and then using kind of when it makes sense to do a lot of projects in one area versus one-off projects. So basically, how do all those things tie together and make sense financially for a city to do that? One of the interesting things based on where you live is how sidewalks are funded, and that might not be as people think of, whereas you pay into roads with your gas tax, or it may come from the federal government in some other vehicle, whereas in Atlanta the adjacent property owner is responsible for the sidewalk out front of their house. And so there's different models where it might make more sense for a city to pool resources and be responsible for all the sidewalks within their city limits or county limits, versus making people fund their own sidewalk repairs and disjointedly repair them. So I think if we were to take all the data collection, condition analysis, project prioritization, and then apply that towards realistic funding methods, then we'd have a really complete package and might deliver the best product we could to our clients.
We're talking with Jim Durrett. Who do you work for?
I run the Buckhead Community Improvement District in Atlanta, Georgia.
And what is that?
A community improvement district is a self-taxing district in which the property owners pay extra tax. They come to the district, and it's my responsibility to invest those tax dollars along with any others that we can attract to make improvements in the area, typically in the transportation system and in the public realm that allows the people and the places to be better connected.
What's the Buckhead area like? What's the history around here?
Well, Buckhead was an exurb, really, initially, of Atlanta way back in the day. It then, over time, became a suburb of Atlanta, which it is today, but it's also more than that, because in the past 20, 30 years, it's seen a lot more development, principally commercial development, and it's become one of the major job centers and activity centers in the city of Atlanta. Today we have the added change of vertical residential development coming in as well. So it's less a commercial district and more a thriving urban district with all kinds of land uses. And what we've been doing since I've been at the CID, and that's 9 years, and it's been in existence since 1999, is really to figure out how to accommodate the tremendous amount of automobile traffic that we have here, because we don't have a gridded set of streets. There are a lot of state routes that come through Buckhead. What we've been doing is we've been trying to figure out how best to accommodate the automobile, but to really embrace creating a more walkable and bikeable and transit-friendly urban place. So that's really been our focus ever since I've been here.
And when you take a suburban place built around a lot of state highways and you decide we'd really rather make it a little more walkable, where do you start?
Well, you start with your signature street, really, which is Peachtree in Atlanta, Georgia. Everybody knows there's a peach tree around every corner in Atlanta. So the very first focus that we had in Buckhead was how to humanize Peachtree, but also in doing so, and I'll describe what I mean by humanize, in doing so, figure out how to manage traffic flow better. Because there are things you can do with a road and a street to make it better for the automobile and the person driving the automobile, while at the same time making it desirable for people not to even want to use the automobile. So we began with Peachtree, and we have been converting Peachtree in Buckhead from what I call a traffic sewer to a complete street for people, regardless of what mode they use to get around. So we did everything from controlling left turns with landscape medians and lanes for the automobile to be in to turn so that they're not stopping through flow traffic, to burying all the utilities, putting in generous vegetative buffers on the side, bike lanes on both sides of Peachtree, and then generous sidewalks with street trees, street furniture, and just making that corridor, the main street through Buckhead, a better place. And then you build off of that, which is what we've been doing, and trying to take that approach to humanizing our streets out from that. So you name the street in Buckhead, we're working on streetscape improvements. We're analyzing where the pinch points are for automobile traffic, because those pinch points, if you can eliminate them and not penalize people who are choosing to walk or ride a bike, then it helps traffic flow so that you don't have exasperated people in traffic jams. So that's the approach we've been taking in Buckhead.
And you have a Buckhead MARTA stop. How does that tie into everything?
Well, one of the projects, we're very lucky in Buckhead because we have not only the Buckhead MARTA station close to where we are right now, but there's also the Lenox MARTA station, and south of us, the Lindbergh MARTA station, which is where MARTA's headquarters is. And I should share with you, I'm on MARTA's board as well. Years ago, the CID worked with MARTA and the City of Atlanta and the State Road and Tollway Authority, because at that time, Georgia 400, which is where the Buckhead MARTA station is located, was a toll road. And in working with all of those partners and the Federal Transit Administration, we pursued a new entrance into the Buckhead MARTA station at the north end of the platform. Previously, if you got off the train at the Buckhead station, everybody would have to walk quite a distance if you were at the front of the train coming north or the back of the train coming south, quite a distance to get up to Peachtree and then to get to your destination. And we said we need to have an entrance and an exit at the MARTA station on the north end of the platform. So we pursued that, and in that collaborative partnership, we were able to fund and build this new entrance into the Buckhead MARTA station, which now provides pedestrian connectivity to both sides of Georgia 400. And the usage almost overnight at this MARTA station took off because we tapped into induced demand. And we also realized, because it was fascinating to see this, the number of people going through the fare gates at Peachtree dropped off, and everybody was wanting to be at the north end of the platform. So we were able to satisfy and create a shorter pedestrian trip for patrons of MARTA right off the bat. And usage has continued to do really great here, while at MARTA system-wide, usage over the last year or so has gone down a little bit for a number of reasons. The same thing is happening across the country, probably having a lot to do with the price of gasoline coming down a little bit from when transit usage was really high, but also the advent of Lyft and Uber. But I'm straying way off of your question there, but that's...
So one of the keys to getting people to ride transit was to actually make it convenient to get to the station.
Access to transit is what this was all about, exactly.
So what, if you wanted to say this was becoming a walkable place, how do you define that? What makes a place like this walkable?
Well, you go back to the book Walkable City, and what were those elements of a place that determine it's going to be walkable and people are going to use it? It has to be functional, it has to be comfortable, it has to be safe. I'm trying to remember all of the elements, but you try to make sure that you're not just putting a sidewalk somewhere. You're making sure that it's going to be attractive in the literal sense. It will attract users. And so that's what we've been doing, is we have been trying to make sure that we understand where the gaps are, and then making sure that we fill the gaps in the best way possible so that it will attract people to use it, rather than just having something, a facility being out there if someone chooses to walk. So we want to make the choice and not a choice.
How far have you come in fixing up the area, and what do you plan for the future?
How far have we come? My short answer is a long way, but nowhere far enough. And so we have a lot left to do. One of the things that we're working on, which is, I believe, our most important project, is the creation, the planning, the design, and the creation of a 9-acre park that will be on top of Georgia 400 and that Buckhead MARTA station that I was talking about. That park will provide east-west and north-south connectivity in an absolutely beautiful setting, where we'll be able to take the Path 400 multi-use trail that we've been working on with a number of partners, which is something we should talk about, and bring people from that trail into that park all the way up to Peachtree. That project itself will absolutely explode the pedestrian traffic that we will have here, because it will be the best walking environment, possibly in Atlanta, because we are making sure that we design the heck out of it and make it as attractive as possible. So that's the big project. The interesting thing about that is it's going to stretch from Lenox Road at the north end of the Buckhead station area all the way to Peachtree. And at Lenox Road, it is hostile to pedestrians and bicycles, with only one exception, and that is maybe a quarter mile along Lenox Road where Path 400 multi-use trail was built just a few years ago. So we're going to be able to completely knit together for pedestrians and cyclists both sides of Georgia 400, which will go a long way to getting us to where we need to be.
So what is this trail you're talking about?
Path 400 is a multi-use greenway trail that Livable Buckhead, the Path Foundation, the Buckhead CID, the City of Atlanta, and other partners have been working on for a number of years. This part of Atlanta is the least parked part of Atlanta per capita in the city. So several years ago, a number of us studied what the opportunities were to put park space, open space in. And then how would we connect those parks, those open spaces, so that people could go from one to another? And we realized that with the Georgia 400 freeway, which we have right here, there is leftover right-of-way in that highway corridor where we could put in a multi-use trail. So we pursued that, and it's going to link the northern parts of Buckhead all the way to the Atlanta Beltline. And the Beltline is very well known. It's transforming the central part of Atlanta in terms of the quality of life and the kind of development that can occur because of that asset. It's going to connect to Atlanta Beltline and come right through Buckhead. And if you think about the streetscape work that we've been doing, the park we're pursuing, the multi-use trail, Path 400, we're going to have a lot of amenities that will make it desirable to walk that nobody even imagined 20 years ago.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.